Hello there and welcome to News Express. It is another week starter edition exclusively brought to you by Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. And let's get right to the headlines, starting from the front page where we have police welfare. Presidency fails to act on pension solution. And we have CBN's MPC sees challenges weigh on loosening rates, skyrocketing inflation, protests, riot fatigue, pressure on AFEX and exchange rate, government revenue pressure. We have sluggish economic growth outlook. Of course, we have all eyes on the Monetary Policy Committee meeting today. What decisions will be made? Okay, over to the summary section. Investors prowl for gains. And that one's a wrap of last week's trading on the NSC, and that's on page 10 of Business AM. And just below that, energy, power and renewable. Counting chickens before eggs hatch. A pandemic hits mobile phones, commodities and agricultural section now. Soybean. Global markets beckons. Catch these headlines on pages 28, 30 and 35 of Business AM this morning. All right, joining me for conversations now into the papers at this time is Philip Isakwa, the publisher, Business AM. Good morning, Mr. Philip.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. All right, just before we get into the headlines proper, over the weekend, the NBS released the third quarter GDP results, and we saw a growth rate of a negative 3.62% in real terms. This obviously represents an improvement of 2.48% points over the negative 6.10% growth rate which was recorded in the second quarter. And it confirms that the Nigerian economy has officially fallen into a second recession in 5 years since we saw in 2016. And, you know, for many Nigerians, it felt like Nigeria never really exited the recession of 2016. And yet they find that they are once again facing another painful squeeze, even at a worse point than the previous one. What are your thoughts on this?
You know, economics has two sides to it, you know. One are the real numbers, and the other is the psychological one. So psychologically, since 2016, we've always believed that, people generally have always believed that the economy has always been in the doldrums. So people never really got a sense that we were out of recession.
Yeah.
You know, so and what has just happened now is that it's a confirmation of this psychological feeling that Nigerians have generally had. If you spoke to a lot of analysts and you spoke to a lot of economists over the years, they always said, we have not gotten out of recession. They actually, at some point, were talking about Nigeria heading to a depression. You know, so recession wasn't the issue. The recession was already psychologically imbibed into the psyche of Nigerians. So what these numbers do now is to say we have gone into recession officially a second time in a short time. But we can see that it's not as bad as the second quarter numbers that we saw.
Right.
You know, so we could say that we managed the economy better, you know, in the third quarter. You know, but again, there are a lot of things happening around global economy and domestic economy that have led to this. You know, remember we are still under the pandemic. You know, that we are now seeing a second wave of, you know, across Europe and America, you know, and that has seeped in, you know, into the numbers that you have seen now. So there are two sides to look at it. Are we managing the economy well? Many economists and analysts will tell you, not really, you know, and if you spoke to a good number of analysts who are independent, you know, they will tell you about concerns that they have raised, you know, regarding the management infrastructure you have superintending the economy. Recall, you know, that for a long time, there was not an organized economic management team. And until perhaps last year or so, or early this year, they set up one. But that economic management team is only advisory. It does not have the potent force, to really engineer things. So two sides mainly, regarding the management of the economy. You have the monetary side, then you have the fiscal side. While the monetary side has been exhausting itself, sometimes assuming a lot of things that you would expect the fiscal side to take on. You have had the fiscal side completely. Sometimes some people will tell you completely abandoning its responsibility. So that has been a major problem. So you have this global economic impact resulting from COVID-19, and you have a country that is dependent on one, or standing on one leg, as it were, in terms of what the earnings, that so foreign exchange earnings that is largely from crude oil.
Okay.
Everything that's been done regarding diversifying the economy, with a lot of attention paid on agriculture, although the numbers did suggest that there have been some form of improvement, in terms of the contribution of non-oil exports, also non-oil side to the GDP, in these new numbers, you will find that Nigeria continues to be handicapped by its inability to effectively diversify the economy.
All right, now this brings me to the headline of the paper this morning. The CBN Monetary Policy Committee is scheduled to hold its final meeting of the year today and tomorrow. How should we expect the Q3 GDP numbers to shape the decisions they'll be making?
I think one of the things that we discussed while putting the paper together was that the GDP numbers were expected to come out this week, between today, I think, on Wednesday. So, but by Friday, the Bureau of Statistics sent out a notice that it will come out on Saturday. So it was a bit of a surprise. You'll find that we did not take that because we wanted to really fully examine the numbers when they actually were released. But there's a thinking that we have. Why did this come out on Saturday? Our thinking is that it was to prepare the MPC, to take into account these new numbers. So because the MPC, obviously, you will have that some numbers will independently go to the MPCs. The Bureau of Statistics already had the numbers they will send to members of the MPC. But we could have leaked out if they had done that before the meeting started. So we think that this provides a guide to the MPC, because they need to consider, MPC members need to consider all the numbers, all the information, economic information, or the economic data, to be able to reach a good conclusion regarding a decision that they will make. But the MPC is constrained by a lot of things, So are you expecting, many people expect to see a loosening of monetary policy rates, at this time, to ginger the economy, But these numbers have come out. GDP, we are in recession, so their decision will be shaped, by the fact that it's an economy that is in recession, and they need to reach a decision that will boost the economy in terms of monetary policy rates. Many think that the MPC will stay flat, because the last time, there was a movement at the last meeting, and normally when there's a movement, you will expect that they will wait out some time to see the impact of their earlier decision. Now coming so close after this, there might be a little dilemma, when the MPC is looking at the numbers, because that with recession, the thinking will be different from the thinking that they normally would have had, looking at the different scenarios that, for instance, the last decision they took to ease rates. So we don't really know what they will make of this, but we expect that the GDP numbers that have come out, Nigeria in recession, will play a good part, But inflation is there, inflation is staring in their faces, We had said their hands are tied, by a number of things that are happening in the economy, Now you have these GDP numbers that have come out that suggest clearly that Nigeria is already in recession. Officially, again, we need to emphasize the point officially, because good economists across the country, and even globally, will have picked up the fact that Nigeria has been in recession for some time.
All right, Mr. Philip, in just a minute, take readers through any other headline worthy of note this week.
I think, again, our pursuit of agricultural policy, recall that Nigeria has spent a lot of money through the instruments of the CBN, pushing a lot of money into agriculture and wanting to see that diversification comes from agriculture. We recall too that if we're talking about employment in Nigeria, agriculture is a major employer of labor, in terms of the numbers of people that are into agriculture. As a matter of fact, analysts will tell you have close to 50, 60, or up to 70% of people domiciled in the rural areas involved in agriculture. And what you will find is that we have a story which should interest the authorities and interest the general public. It has to do with the different crops. Our look at commodities is from a global perspective. There are a number of crops or produce that we have competitive advantage over. That there ought to be deliberate policy. And here, today, we are looking at soybean. Soybean, Nigeria has the advantage, But if you look at a lot of things happening in the global market, you find that when our dependence on crude oil, it can be matched or even overtaken by some particular produce, palm oil in particular, that Nigeria used to have advantage in the 50s and the 60s, if you hear how much on the global market that palm oil is selling for, you will wonder why all the emphasis continue to be crude oil. I'll tell you why. One has a lot of work to be done. The other has no work, because technology for crude oil production comes from the West, and because Nigeria doesn't do, we have experts who work in the oil industry, but in terms of having ownership of the technology for crude oil production, Nigeria has zero, and because you have technology made from outside, which easily means that you don't need to do the hard work. That's why there's a lot of dependence on it. But palm oil and the others, you will have a lot of work to do.
All right, Mr. Philip, we'll have to draw the curtain here on the show. Thank you so much for your detailed contribution this morning. We'll get back to you much later in the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so wrap on the show this morning. That was Mr. Philip, the publisher, Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. The market analysis comes up in just a moment. Stay with us.